All vulnerabilities that are discovered are not exploitable in nature. However, exploits can be generated, created, and spread throughout the network and given to other people that then had those exploits. And so the vulnerability, if produced, can lead to exploitation, but that's not necessarily always the case. The way that people determine or identify that a vulnerability is exploitable is through threat intelligence research and then vendor releases. Oftentimes, a vendor will release updates for something that they know could be exploited, and then a security researcher or legitimate attacker can take those two versions, the updated version and the previous version of that software, compare them, and then create an exploit for them. And then once that exploit is created, it can be given to really whoever out in the public is looking for that specific vulnerability.
Okay, so you mentioned that a vendor will release an update for a new version of a software application. And are you saying that a legitimate attacker would then take a look at that updated software, compare it to the previous version of that software, and then reverse engineer it to find where a vulnerability could be exploited?
Yep, that's exactly. And often with that updated version, the vendor will release an assigned vulnerability and then call it out. If you receive a Microsoft update or an Apple update to your product, usually it's given with a disclaimer, hey, we've updated this part of our software so that X works better, or because there's a security flaw in Y, right? So, what security researchers and legitimate attackers will do is compare those two pieces of software. They'll identify strings in that software where a vulnerability could exist, and then they'll attempt to produce an exploit for that specific vulnerability. Depending on how widespread that vulnerability could be, that's how the vulnerability researchers, attackers produce these things to create those exploits that take advantage of those vulnerabilities.
Got it. Interesting. Is there like a cottage industry of attackers that are reverse engineering these things and then selling it to other attackers?
Yeah, absolutely. You hear of these things called the dark web marketplaces, oftentimes meant for drug exchange, but there's a lot of marketplaces that attackers sell exploit code on. It's a whole different game of really producing complex attacks when you can go to a dark web marketplace, buy all of the things that you need to do to carry out an attack that organizations maybe haven't patched. If I were an attacker, I don't know if I'd spend time, like years' time, trying to create an exploit for a Microsoft vulnerability where 95% of all Fortune 5,000 organizations use Microsoft. I don't know if I'd use my couple of years of time researching and trying to develop my own exploit for a specific vulnerability when I could just go to a dark web or some forum and then buy an exploit for that vulnerability.